Hello and welcome guys, my name is Lewis from setupforvolleyball.com and today I'm going to go over the 6-2 rotation for when you are the serving team. If you're after the serve-receive rotations, if you look on my channel or alternatively look in the top right now, you will see a banner for the video that I did not too long ago going over them rotations. If you find this content helpful and useful, please do consider sharing it with anybody that you think may need it. Also, give it a thumbs up, and if you could consider subscribing, we'll be dropping lots more content exactly like this. So without further ado, let's get into these rotations. Here we are once again to go over the serve-receive rotation in the 6-2 formation. So just a quick bit of background on the 6-2 formation before we get into the guide. So the 6-2 volleyball formation is it's more commonly seen in higher levels than it is in beginner levels, so it's more commonly seen in sort of intermediate advanced levels, just because it's like the 4-2 formation but with additional steps. So obviously the 4-2 is sort of where you'd get introduced to this formation. You get to grips with like how you rotate, who plays where, and then the 6-2 basically is the 4-2 but takes it a little bit further, adds a little bit more variety into the lineup. So the 6 in the formation represents the number of hitters that you have on the court, and the 2 represents the number of setters. No, this doesn't mean you have 8 players on the court, but it does mean that you have 6 hitters and 2 setters. I'll get into why that is in a little bit. So moving on to some of the advantages of the 6-2 formation. One advantage that is mainly the reason why it's used is because it can add a lot of flexibility in the lineup. So if you have a person who is a very good setter, but perhaps they are a little bit too small or they don't jump that well, so they would be a bit of a liability in the front row when it comes to blocking and attacking, then when that, you can have the setter play back row, step forward and set when they're in the back row, but then when they move round and they would be going to the front court, you can sub them out for potentially a stronger hitter, and then the second setter can come in and take up that slack as the back row setter again. So it just allows you to have a lot of flexibility in your starting lineup. It allows you to bring in hitters as you need them. Obviously you still have to abide by the substitution rules, but it can just be a great way of getting hitters constantly in that front row, as well as good blockers. The other benefit is, as I've sort of just touched on anyway, is it allows you to keep 3 hitters in the front court at all times, because the setter who is in the back row would be the prominent setter for all of them rotations. So until that setter went in the front row, in which case they stop becoming the setter, and the player that was front row, who would be the setter, is going to come back and set. It's a little bit confusing to get your head around, and maybe from my descriptions it's not the best, but hopefully when we get into these rotations you'll start to see how it works a little bit more. So the last thing to mention before we dive into this is that people say rotations are difficult. I disagree. I've said it in all of my other videos. Rotations themselves I don't think are difficult, because ultimately you are going from one spot to the same spot on the court pretty much every single time. You only have 2 positions on the court, the position you play when you're front row and the position that you play when you're back row. So I'm sure you can appreciate that getting to that same position isn't difficult. The difficult bit for me is knowing where to stack and where to stand before the ball is served, to make sure that you stay in rotation whilst making everybody's journey to their preferred spot on the court a lot more efficient. So when it comes to rotations, I don't think they're difficult. It's knowing where to stand before the serve, and then the most efficient way of getting to that spot. That's where it gets a little bit more confusing, I think. So moving on, this is what we would refer to as a lineup sheet. This is what your coach or your manager would have to submit before each set to signify to the officials where each player is starting on the court. So in this particular setup here, we have our outside at position 1 or zone 1, which would be the back right of the court. At position 2, which would be the front right, we have our middle. Position 3, we have our right side hitter, who is also would be known in this rotation as the second setter. And then at 4 we have our other outside, and then at 5 we have our middle. So on the court, this is how it would be lined up. So this is the net here, as you can see. We have our middle, right side, outside, outside. So when you hear to people referring to position 2 or zone 2, you can now relate to exactly what they're on about. So zone 2 would be here, zone 3, zone 4, zone 5, zone 6, zone 1. One thing to note is that when we are rotating, we rotate in a clockwise direction. However, if you were looking at these zones as a count up, they go in a counterclockwise direction. So it might be easier for you to remember that the back middle is 6, and then you count down as you move around the court. So this is our starting lineup. This would be a common sort of starting lineup for our 6-2 formation if we were the serving team. So obviously in this position we have our outside serving first, as you can see here it says service. So our outside is going to step back to serve the ball, and then I've said this in a lot of my other videos, many coaches like to have their middle player playing in this deep 6 position here. I like to have an outside play this position because the outside is generally a stronger hitter, or can be a stronger hitter, and if the pass isn't very good and so the setter has to set the ball from here, it's much easier to put a ball up just in this middle position here for this outside player to come in and hit than potentially it would be for a middle to hit that. Another good reason why I like to have the outside as the deep 6 player is that if you are swapping in and out a libero, I like to have the libero at the 5 spot, because if you think, the most common hit generally is going to be from this 4 position here of the opponents. So when they're hitting that hard cross angle, it's straight at the libero, whereas the 6 player obviously is going to be deep, so they're going to be covering behind these 2 players, waiting for tips off the block, or just hiding off these shoulders here. So they will get hitting action, and obviously they do have to be a good defender, but I like to have the libero or the middle at the 5 spot and my outside at 6. So just to clear that up before we move forward, because I will keep referring to the fact that the middle for me is at 5, not at 6. If your coach has you as a middle and you play 6, just look at the outside rotations when we are backcourt, and obviously vice versa. If you're an outside and you play at position 5 when you're backcourt, just remember they're the other way around. So now I've cleared that up, outside's back to serve, setter steps forward to where they would naturally defend, which would be at the 1 position. Middle, for me, as I've just said, is going to play this 5 position here, so they can both stand in the positions that they need to be, ready for defence. At the front court, we obviously want to get our right side hitter to the right side. Currently they are in the middle of the court, but it's always better to have your middle in the correct position, because they're generally the ones that are going to be blocking both directions, so it's a lot easier for them to not have to worry about getting here, them figuring out where they block. So just start them at the middle of the net, they're ready to block, they're ready for any overpasses, any quick attacks, and then just have your right side stacked just to the left of them. And then if we move on to the next one, you can see that I've still got the same positions here, so outside serving, setter at 1, middle at 5. Outside is already in the correct position, so the only people that would be out of position would be the middle and the right side. They both stack in this middle position. The right side needs to make sure they don't cross to the right of the middle before the serve. When that ball's served, we start rotating. Right side goes to this right spot at 2. So you have your outside at 4, middle at 3, right side or opposite at 2, or sometimes called an offset in this particular rotation, because they are the off-setter. They are the setter that would come around and take this position later. And then all the outside needs to do is serve and come onto court. They can either serve, well, they can serve off from anywhere on the back line, but it might be easier for them just to serve from the middle and then step straight on. And then this is how we would end up. This would be our base positions. Outside at 4, middle at 3, right side at 2, setter, outside, middle. And that is rotation 1. As you can see, very straightforward. Nobody is really that far put out other than this right side potentially. But a very simple rotation, not too much collision going on. They haven't got to run through lots of traffic. So on to rotation 2. So we've all rotated 1 spot in a clockwise direction. So the setter that was at 6 has moved over to 5, and so on and so forth. Now, in this rotation, the middle would be the server. So the middle is going to step back and serve. Now, obviously the middle would be serving from this position if we were just going to look at the chart that I had up earlier. But obviously the middle can serve anywhere along this back line, because when they're off the court, they aren't affected by the rotation rules. So the middle can just come back, and rather than having to serve here and then run all the way over to this 5 spot, they can just stand over here, serve from here, it's not a problem. So the middle, I've put serving in this area, as you can see here. And then our outside can just step back into their natural deep 6 position. The setter is going to step just to the left of the outside, and the second that ball is served going to run to their 1 spot. And then on this occasion, the right side is the one who's in the correct area, and the outside is the one who's out of rotation. And obviously so is the middle. But the easiest thing again for the middle to do is to step up right next to the net in the centre in their position, so they're ready for the quick attacks, the overpass, whatever may come their way. And then the outside's just got to do a short run into this spot here. So middle server, outside at 6, setter currently at 5, going to run across to 1. Outside and middle are going to stack in this centre spot. Outside's going to dart over here, right side's already in the correct area. So the second that middle serves, he's going to run on and chase his own serve into the 5 spot. Setter's going to dart across, outside's going to dart into this 4 spot, and then this is how we would have our base positions. As you will notice that these base positions haven't changed since the last rotation, because the base positions will always be the same. As I said, we always want to get our players into their preferred positions. So that's why I was saying earlier that rotations aren't that difficult, because you're only running to the same spot on the court. So moving on to our last rotation. In this particular occasion, obviously, the setter who was at 5 will have moved to the front court. But as I've said, the setter is both an attacker and a setter in this rotation. Now, when the setter has gone front court, they have now become the right side hitter. So obviously, as I was saying at the start, some coaches, if the setter isn't a particularly strong hitter, they may sub them off here, and then a new right-sided player will come on for them until they get back around this rotation, in which case the right side will come off and the setter will come back on. So as you can see, there's lots of flexibility and lots of options with this, but for the sake of this rotation, the setter that was here has moved up to the front court and now isn't setting. They have become the right side hitter, and the right side hitter that was at position 2 has come back to 1 and has become the setter. So obviously in this one, the middle is the only player in the correct spot in the front of the court. So the right side is going to stack just to the left of the middle, and the outside is going to stack just to the right of the middle, so they're all clustered in the centre there. And then the second this setter serves, the outside is going to run round, middle is going to run through, and they're all going to line up in that spot. Middle and outside again are the wrong way around, so they're going to stack in this middle position as close for the outside to be at this deep 6 position as possible. Second that ball is served, middle is just going to step left into this 5 position, setter is going to follow their own serve. So I won't go over that again, I will just bring up the arrows to show you. Setter is going to serve, follow his own serve, come to the 1 position to defend. Outside and middle will stack in this middle position, middle will dart over here to the 5 spot, outside will stay where they are. They may take 1 step to the right if they've been kind to the middle and given them less of a run. Right side's going to dart through this gap over to the right side, outside is going to run round to the 4 spot. And then again, you will notice we have the exact same base positions. And then the reason that there's only 3 is because obviously, the reason there's only 3 rotations, sorry, just clarify, is obviously the setter who was at this position, once they have, say they lose this point and win the next one, go back to serving, obviously everyone will rotate 1 spot and then they will be back to rotation 1. So that is all of the rotations when you are the serving team in the 6-2 formation. I hope you found this content useful. If you did find it useful and you think that other people may benefit from it, please do share it, as it really helps. If you enjoyed the content, please give it a thumbs up. Drop any comments below if you've got any, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you very much, guys. See you next time. Goodbye.